Good evening, and welcome back. Tonight, we are leaving the flickering lights of the modern age behind. We are stepping away from the warmth of the radiator, the glow of the screen, and the certainty of the floor beneath our feet. Tonight, we travel back to a time when the world was divided into two halves, the world you knew, and the world that might kill you. As you settle into your blankets, feel the weight of them. Imagine that weight is not cotton or wool, but the heavy, salt-crusted canvas of a sail. Imagine the air around you is not the still air of a bedroom, but a biting, restless wind that has traveled 1,000 miles across open water just to find you. Take a deep breath, settle in, and let us begin our journey into the year 1607. In the beginning, there was only the wooden hull. To the colonist, the ship was not a vessel of discovery. It was a floating splinter. It was a tiny, fragile world of oak and pitch, held together by the prayers of the desperate and the calloused hands of the weary. Before you ever set foot on the soil of the New World, you had to survive the gray purgatory, the Atlantic crossing. Modern tongues describe travel as a transition, a bridge between points. But in the 17th century, the crossing was a suspension of life itself. It was a yawning void of time, 6 to 10 weeks of existing in a space that was neither land nor sea, neither life nor death. You are cramped into the 'tween decks, a space so low a grown man cannot stand straight. A space where the ceiling is a constant reminder of your own stature. It is dark, not the soft darkness of a summer night, but a thick, oppressive gloom, heavy with the scent of unwashed bodies, rotting timber, and the sharp, acidic temps of vomit. The ship moves with a rhythm that is ancient and indifferent. It does not glide, it heaves, it groans like a living thing in labor. You hear the voice of the ship, the screaming of the hemp ropes under tension, the thud of the waves against the hull like the fist of a giant demanding entry. Every tilt of the floor is a reminder that only a few inches of English oak stand between you and the crushing, silent depths of the abyss. In this darkness, time loses its shape. There are no clocks, only the ringing of the ship's bell and the slow, agonizing crawl of the sun across a gray sky. Your diet is a study in decay. The hardtack, a biscuit baked months ago, is as hard as the stones of a cathedral. You do not eat it so much as you endure it. You learn to tap it on the table first, a rhythmic, hollow sound, to knock out the weevil's small, white worms that have claimed the bread as their own kingdom. You eat in the dark, so you do not have to see what moves within your meal. The water, stored in wooden barrels, grows ropey and thick. It turns a dull, stagnant green, smelling of the swamp. You drink it only because the fire in your throat demands it, knowing that with every swallow, you are inviting the bloody flux to take root in your belly. This is the first test of the colonial spirit, the realization that your body is no longer yours. It belongs to the ship, to the sea, and to the slow, grinding machinery of the voyage. As the weeks pass, the scurvy begins its quiet work. It is a haunting disease, a slow dissolution of the self. Your gums soften like wet clay. Your old scars wounds you thought had healed years ago in the old world begin to open again, as if the body is forgetting how to hold itself together. You feel a lethargy so deep it reaches your bones. The world becomes a dream of green fields and fresh water, a dream that feels more real than the damp, salt-soaked blanket you huddle beneath. You are surrounded by strangers who have become kin through shared misery. You hear their coughs in the dark, their whispered prayers, their quiet weeping. There is no privacy here, no sanctuary for the soul. You are a collective, a mass of humanity being tossed across the world's largest graveyard. And then there is the silence of the sea. On the rare days when the wind dies, the ship sits motionless upon a mirror of leaden water. The sails hang limp and ghostly. In this stillness, the horror of your isolation truly sinks in. You are thousands of miles from a paved road, thousands of miles from a stone church, thousands of miles from a mother's voice. You are suspended in the palm of a god who seems to have forgotten this corner of the map. But the sea is never truly silent. Even in the calm, you hear the breathing of the ocean, the slow swell that moves the ship up and down, a cradle for a child that will never wake. You realize then that you are not a conqueror. You are a passenger on a whim. If you survive the storms that scream through the rigging like the furies of old, if you survive the fever that thins the ranks of the passengers night after night, you begin to look for signs: a piece of driftwood, a certain type of bird, a change in the color of the water from the deep, terrifying blue of the abyss to a pale, hopeful green. Then, one morning, the air changes. It is no longer just salt and spray. There is a scent, faint, elusive, yet undeniable. It is the scent of pine needles, of damp earth, of ancient, decaying leaves. It is the scent of the wilderness. It is the scent of your new home and your potential grave. You stand on the deck, your legs trembling from weeks of motion, and you see it, a low, dark line on the horizon. It is not the white cliffs of Dover. It is a wall of green, so thick and unbroken that it looks like a solid fortification. There are no piers. There are no smoking chimneys. There is only the trees and the silence that dwells beneath them. You have survived the crossing. You have lasted the first journey. But the week has not yet begun. The wilderness is watching, and it does not recognize your king, your god, or your gold. It only recognizes strength, and you have never been more tired. You have stepped off the splintered oak of the ship and onto the hem of a continent. For months, your world was defined by the horizon, a flat, infinite line where the leaden sky met the gray sea. Now that line has been shattered. Before you stands a vertical world, a wall of timber so dense, so ancient, and so indifferent to your arrival that it feels like a physical weight against your chest. As you settle deeper into your bed, imagine the transition of the ground beneath you. For weeks, the world heaved and tilted. Now, the earth is unnervingly still. It is a stillness that hums. Your sea legs betray you. The land seems to roll like the waves you just left, a phenomenon the sailors call terra firma sickness. You are dizzy, malnourished, and standing on the edge of a mystery that stretches for 3,000 miles to the west. In the beginning, there were no clearings. There were no meadows waiting for your plow. There was only the forest, the great eastern woodland to the European eye, accustomed to the manicured parks of London or the open heaths of the countryside. This was not nature. This was a cathedral of shadows. The trees here are giants, their trunks wider than the reach of 3 men, their canopies so thick that even at noon the ground dwells in a permanent, mossy twilight. You take your first breath of the new world. It is heavy. It smells of damp earth, of rotting cedar, and of a sharp, resinous sap that sticks to the back of your throat. It is the smell of a world that has been breathing on its own for millennia without the interference of man. You realize, with a sudden, cold clarity, that you are the intruder. You are a ghost walking into a living machine. The illusion of abundance, the first day, is defined by a strange, deceptive beauty. You see the berries hanging from the thickets. You see the deer flickering like shadows through the brush. You see the rivers shimmering with fish so thick they say you could walk across their backs. This is the eros of the new world, the desire and the promise. It lures you in. You think, I will not only survive, I will thrive. But this is the first trap of the settlement. The abundance is wild, and you are civilized, which is to say, you are helpless. You do not know which berry brings nourishment and which brings a slow, cramping death. You do not know that the shimmering river carries parasites that will turn your insides to water. You do not know how to speak to the silence of the woods. You begin the work. Your hands, softened by the dampness of the voyage, are your only tools. You must carve a space for yourself out of the nothingness. You pick up an axe. The sound of the first strike against a virgin oak is a revelation. It is small. It is tinny. The forest seems to swallow the sound instantly, as if the trees are laughing at your effort. By the 10th swing, your palms are weeping blood. By the 100th, your shoulders are a landscape of fire. And the Tritha, massive, indifferent, oak has barely a chip in its flank. This is the physical reality of the first week, the realization of your own insignificance. In the old world, a man was defined by his name, his trade, or his father. Here, you are defined only by the calories you can expend before you collapse. The first nightfall, as the sun begins to dip below that jagged wall of green, a new fear takes root. In the Greek myths, Nyx the night was a force so thick even chaos recoiled. In the American wilderness, the night is a physical presence. It does not fall. It emerges from the trees. Without the light of a city, without the glow of a distant village, the darkness is absolute. It is a velvet hood pulled over your head. You huddle around a small, tiny, flickering altar of heat that you have built on the edge of the beach. You stay close to the water, for the sea is a known enemy, while the forest is an unknown one. Then the sounds begin. The new world is not silent at night. It is a cacophony of the unseen. You hear the howl, a long, mournful sound that tears through the air. You call it a wolf, but in your heart it sounds like something older, something that has been waiting for you to arrive. You hear the screech of a bobcat, a sound so human in its agony that you grip your musket until your knuckles turn white. Every snap of a twig is the footstep of a giant. Every rustle of the leaves is a whispered threat. You lie down on the bare earth. It is cold, a deep, damp chill that seeps through your clothes and settles in your marrow. You are surrounded by the other survivors, men and women, whose faces are hollowed by the firelight. No one speaks. To speak would be to admit that you are terrified. You realize that in the old world you were protected by 1,000 invisible threads, the law, the church, the neighbor, the stone wall. Here, those threads have been snapped. You are standing in the Tartarus of the unknown, the toil of the spirit. By the second day of your first week, the spirit of the wilderness begins to grate against your mind. It is the sheer scale of the work ahead. To survive, you must build, you must dig, you must plant, but you are hungry. The salt pork you brought from the ship is rancid. The peas are full of dust. You look at the men around you. Some are gentlemen, men who have never had a callus on their hands, men who believe that because they have a title, the earth should bow to them. You see the shock in their eyes. They are looking for a servant to bring them water, but there are no servants here. there is only the axe and the mud. You begin to see the first cracks in the social body. In the Greek myths, the Titans fought amongst themselves for dominance. Here, in the mud of the James River or the sands of Plymouth, the same struggle begins. Who will lead? Who will work? Who will guard the camp while the others sleep? The stress of the wilderness acts like a solvent, dissolving the masks of civilization. You see the greed in one man's eyes as he hides a biscuit. You see the cowardice in another as he refuses to enter the tree line. You see the emergence of the new man, the one who does not complain, the one who settles into the rhythm of the work with a grim, silent intensity. You spend the day dragging timber. The mud is a thick, gray clay that clings to your boots, making every step a feat of strength. By noon, you are soaked in sweat, despite the chill. The mosquitoes arrive, not the small, annoying insects of England, but clouds of stinging fire that find the soft skin behind your ears and the insides of your wrists. Your face swells, your eyes itch. You are being eaten alive by the land you came to conquer. As you sit by the fire on the second night, nursing your ruined hands, you look back at the ship anchored in the bay. It looks like a toy. It looks like a memory of a life that no longer exists. You realize that you cannot go back. The sea is a wall, and the forest is a wall. You are trapped in the now. As you settle deeper into your pillows, let the world around you dissolve. Imagine that the soft mattress beneath you is replaced by the uneven, cold floor of the earth. The ceiling above you is no longer plaster and paint, but a thatched roof of marsh grass, dripping with the slow, rhythmic tears of a coastal rain. We are moving into the third and fourth days of your first week. The initial adrenaline of the landing has evaporated, leaving behind a hollow, aching exhaustion. This is the stage where the great Mother Gaia, the American Earth, begins to demand her tribute in sweat and bone. In the Greek myths, the first beings lived in caves and shadows before the gods brought them the gift of architecture. In the colonial wilderness, you have traveled backward in time. You are a modern man or woman forced into the life of a cave dweller. Your first task is not to build a home, but to build a survival cell. The digging of the dugout. You do not begin with a log cabin. That is a myth of the later centuries, a luxury you cannot afford. Instead, you begin with the dugout. You take your Shuvala-heavy, iron-shod tooland. You attack the hillside. The soil is not the dark, friable loam of an English garden. It is a tangle of ancient roots, as thick as a man's thigh and as stubborn as the sea. Each strike of the shovel vibrates up your arms, shaking your very teeth. You dig a hole into the side of the earth, 6 feet deep, 8 feet wide. You are essentially digging your own grave, but one you intend to live in. The walls are nothing but raw, weeping dirt. As you dig, you uncover the inhabitants of this soil, pale, blind grubs, and skittering centipedes that have not seen the sun in 100 years. They represent the life of the new world, hidden, resilient, and indifferent to your presence. Once the hole is dug, you must roof it. You go to the marshes, where the salt grass grows tall and sharp as razors. You cut it by the armload, your fingers soon covered in 100 tiny, stinging nicks. You weave this grass together with a thick gray slurry of clay and water to create a wattle and daub roof. It is a primitive, heavy labor. The mud dries on your skin, cracking and pulling, until you feel as though you are becoming a creature of the earth yourself. By the time the sun begins to set on the third day, Your dugout is finished. You crawl inside. It is dark. It is damp. It smells of wet wool and old stone. You lie on a bed of pine boughs, the needles poking through your thin shirt. But as the wind howls through the trees outside, a sound like 1,000 voices screaming in a language you, Dan, T, understand. This hole in the ground feels like a cathedral. It is the only place in 3,000 miles where the wind cannot touch you. The litany of the hearth fire in the old stories was stolen from the gods. In the first week of a colonial settlement, fire is the only thing that keeps the void at bay. But building a fire here is not a simple task. Everything is damp. The air is heavy with the breath of the ocean, and the wood, even the fallen branches, is soaked through with the rot of the forest. You spend hours huddled over a tinderbox. Your hands are shaking, partly from the cold, partly from the terrifying lack of protein in your blood. You strike the flint against the steel. Click, click, click. The sound is a small, desperate heartbeat in the vast silence of the woods. A spark lands. You blow on it, your breath a soft, rhythmic lullaby. Finally, a curl of blue smoke rises. When the flame finally takes hold, the world changes. The shadows of the trees, which had been pressing in on you, suddenly recoil. The light of the fire creates a small, golden circle of civilization. Inside this circle, you are a human being with a history. Outside this circle, you are merely prey. You sit by the fire and look at your hands. They are no longer the hands you brought from Europe. The fingernails are broken and black with soil. The palms are a map of blisters and calluses. You realize that the old world is falling away from you like dead skin. You are being remade by the labor. The weight of the silence in this third chapter of your week. The most harrowing enemy is not the wolf or the hunger, but the silence. In London, there was always the sound of a cart, a distant bell, the murmur of a crowd. Here, when the wind dies down, the silence is so heavy, it feels like a physical pressure on your eardrums. It is the original silence, the sound the world made before humans arrived to name the things within it. You begin to hear things in that silence. The creak of a limb high above, the thump of a falling acorn. Each sound is magnified 1,000 times. Your brain, wired for the social hum of a city, begins to hallucinate patterns in the noise. You think you hear a voice calling your name from the tree line. You think you hear the rhythmic drumming of a ceremony deep in the woods. You reach for your musket. It is a heavy, clumsy weapon, a matchlock that requires a glowing cord of hemp to fire. It is temperamental and slow. In the damp air, the match often goes out, leaving you with nothing but a heavy stick against the dark. You realize that your technology, the pride of the 17th century, is fragile. It is a toy compared to the ancient, brooding power of the forest. The communion of the weary as the night deepens. You are joined in your dugout by 2 other settlers. Space is a luxury, so you huddle together for warmth. You can hear their breathing ragged and wet. One of them is a young man, perhaps 19, who came seeking gold. Now, he only seeks a dry place to shiver. The other is an older man, a carpenter, whose tools have already begun to rust in the salt air. No one speaks of the golden age now. No one speaks of the new Jerusalem. The conversation is reduced to the elemental. Is the roof holding? The wood is wet. I have a pain in my chest that will not leave. This is the true history of America, not the grand speeches in Parliament. but the whispered fears of 3 men huddling in a hole in the dirt. You realize that the settlement is not a place, it is a collective act of will. If any one of you gives up, the whole collapses. If the fire goes out, the darkness wins. You try to sleep, but the earth is active beneath you. You feel the thrum of the forest. You realize that the trees are connected, their roots woven together in a vast underground web. You are sleeping on top of a giant, and you are not sure if it has noticed you yet. As the gray light of dawn begins to filter through the cracks in the grass roof, you feel a sense of grim triumph. You have lasted another night. The cycle of the day, as the Greeks called it, has turned once more. But as you crawl out of the dugout, your joints popping and your muscles screaming, you see the wall of trees waiting for you. They have not moved, they have not changed. They are waiting for the next strike of your axe. The shelter is built, a low and humped thing of mud and grass. But as you crawl into the damp interior on the 4th night, you realize that the forest has already entered you. This is the second war of the first week not. A war of axes against trees, but a war of the blood. In the colonial journals, they called it the seasoning. It was a trial by fire and water, a period where the body either adapted to the alien humors of the New World or was reclaimed by the earth. As you lie in the gloom of your dugout, the rhythm of your heart feels different. It is faster, a frantic drumming against your ribs. You feel a chill, but it is not the chill of the wind. It is a coldness that radiates from the center of your bones, as if your very marrow has turned to ice. You pull your salt-stiffened cloak tighter, but the shiver is relentless. This is the arrival of the ague, the malarial fever that haunted the riverbanks of the Chesapeake and the marshes of the North. The invasion of the humors. In the 17th century, men believed the body was a vessel of 4 humors: blood, phlegm, yellow, bile, and black bile. They believed that health was a delicate balance, a harmony of the internal tides. But the New World is a land of extremes. The air is too thick with miasma, the rising vapors of the swamp sand. The water is too heavy with the salts of the sea. You reach for your water skin. The water inside is stagnant, taken from a shallow well dug too close to the waste pits. As it hits your tongue, you taste the copper and the rot. Within hours, the bloody flux, dysentery, begins its work. This is the great unmentioned horror of the colonial week. It is a loss of dignity so absolute that it strips away the last vestiges of the person you used to be. You are no longer a pioneer. You are a leaking vessel of pain. The Gia of this land is not a nurturing mother to you. To the ancient trees and the teeming insects, you are simply a source of nitrogen. The mosquitoes, those ministers of the swamp, have left their mark on your neck and arms. You do not know yet that they are the carriers of the fever, the tiny winged titans that topple more men than the arrow or the cold. You only know that your skin is a map of fire and that your mind is beginning to wander. The fever dream of the old world in the height of the fever. The walls of your dugout begin to dissolve. The mud and grass give way to the memory of stone. You are no longer in the wilderness. You are back in the village of your birth. You hear the rhythmic clop-clop of a horse on a cobbled street. You smell the roasting of mutton and the sweetness of an apple orchard in the rain. This is the psychological abyss. The mind, unable to cope with the brutal indifference of the American forest, retreats into the Elysium of memory. You see the faces of people you left behind, a sister, a shopkeeper. They look at you with pity. They reach out to touch your forehead, but their hands are made of mist. You wake with a start. The dream is gone. The only sound is the heavy, wet breathing of your companion in the dark and the scritchy-scritch of a rodent burrowing through the thatch above your head. The reality of the first week returns like a blow to the stomach. You are 1,000 leagues from home, huddled in a hole, and your body is failing you. The Colonial apothecary. If you were in London, you might seek an apothecary. You might be bled with leeches or given a syrup of poppies. But here, the only medicine is the cure of the woods, and you do not yet know the language of the plants. You look at the bark of the willow, the root of the sassafras, and the berry of the nightshade. They are silent. The carpenter in the dugout with you reaches into his pack and pulls out a small, withered piece of mummy powder, or perhaps a bezoar stone, a charm brought from the old world to ward off poison. He presses it into your hand. It is cold and useless. You realize then that the magic of the East has no power here. The new world demands a new kind of medicine, the medicine of endurance. You must learn to sweat it out. You lie in the dark and you let the fever burn. You listen to the sounds of the camp outside, the coughs, the groans, the occasional crack of a musket as a nervous sentry fires at a shadow. You are part of a chorus of the sick. It is said that in some settlements, within the first week, there were not enough healthy men to bury the dead. The starving time has not yet arrived, but the weakening time is in full swing. The sanctity of the threshold. By the dawn of the 5th day, your fever breaks. You are weak, your limbs feeling like water, but you are still breathing. You crawl to the entrance of your dugout and look out at the P Street, a muddy track between a dozen similar holes in the earth. You see a woman standing over a small pot. She is stirring a gray porridge of crushed maize and river water. Her eyes are sunken, her skin the color of parchment, but she is standing. This is the first miracle of the settlement. It is the sight of a human being refusing to return to the dust. You realize that the architecture you have built is not just the dugout. It is the social architecture of the survivors. You have shared your breath, your germs, and your terror with these strangers. In the old world, you were neighbors by habit. Here, you are neighbors by blood and bile. As you take your first unsteady step out into the light, the weight of the forest is still there. The trees are still watching. The Uranus of the sky is still vast and cold. But you have built, you have created a place that is inside, and in doing so, you have claimed the first square inch of the continent. You pick up your shovel. Your hands scream in protest, the scabs of your blisters cracking open once more. But you strike the earth, thud. The sound is deeper today. It is the sound of a root being severed. It is the sound of a man who has looked into the yawning void of the first week and decided to stay. You are standing in the middle of a literal Edena land of massive turkeys, roaming deer, and rivers teeming with sturgeon, and yet you are starving. You must blow on the slow match to make it glow. You must pour the priming powder into the pan with steady hands. The psychology of the empty belly. It is the most beautiful thing you have ever tasted. The Atlantic, which was your prison for 2 months, now becomes your only hope. The Pontes of the Greeks, the sighs, the only thing that feels familiar. the sinking of the sun. As the light begins to fail on the sixth day, the cosmic weight of the hunger settles over the camp. You return to your dugout, your belly a hollow cave of nothingness. You are dreaming of the oyster. Your mind is beginning to map the green desert. You are beginning to learn the language of the void. You have lasted 6 days. Tomorrow is the 7th day of rest in the old world, but in the new world, it will be the day of the great trial. You close your eyes, the hunger a rhythmic pulse in your temples, and you wait for the dawn of the final day of your first week. By the 6th day, the silence of the woods has transformed. It is no longer an absence of sound. It has become a presence. In your first 3 days, you feared the monsters, the wolves, the bears, the screaming cats of the night. But now, as your senses sharpen through the hunger and the seasoning fever, you realize there is a different kind of shadow moving through the timber. You are standing at the edge of the clearing you have bled to create. You are leaning on your shovel, your breath coming in ragged, shallow gasps. Suddenly, you freeze. The hair on the back of your neck rises, a primal instinct older than your civilization. You look into the wall of green, and for a split second you see it, the flicker of a bronze limb, the rustle of a deerskin mantle, the glint of an eye that reflects the sun like a polished stone. And then it is gone. The Titan's observation in the journals of the first settlers. They spoke of the salvages with a mixture of awe and dread. To a European mind, steeped in the order of stone walls and iron fences, the indigenous people, the Powhatan, the Wampanoag, the Pequot, did not seem like men. They seemed like elementals. They moved through the brush without the snap of a twig. They appeared and disappeared like the nymphs or dryads of the Greek groves. This is the first psychological erosion of your week. You realize that while you have been struggling to survive a single hour, they have been thriving here for 10,000 years. You are a clumsy titan, knocking over trees and screaming with your iron tools, while they are the air and the wind. You begin to find signs of their presence. A ring of ash where a fire once burned, hidden in a hollow you thought was untouched. A notched tree that points toward a path you cannot see. A discarded shell by the river. These are the footprints. They remind you that you are not a pioneer. You are a tenant in a house that is already occupied. The psychology of the watcher, the weight of the 6th day, is defined by the pressure of the unseen. You find that you can no longer work with your back to the woods. Every time a bird takes flight with a sudden whir of wings, you reach for your sword. Your mind, already frayed by the lack of sleep and the ghost noises of the dugout, begins to project images onto the foliage. You see faces in the knots of the oak trees. You see figures in the swaying of the tall grass. This is the Pandora's box of the colonial mind. Once the lid of fear is opened, you cannot close it. You realize that the neighbors know your every move. They know how many fish you failed to catch. They know how many times your fire went out. They know that your great ship is leaking, and that your gentlemen are weeping in the dark. In the Greek myths, the Furies were the spirits of vengeance who tracked the footsteps of the guilty. To the colonist, the people of the woods become a collective fury. You feel the guilt of your intrusion. You look at the sickle of flint you have used to cut the earth, and you wonder if the land itself is preparing to strike back through the hands of those who truly own it. The first contact, the mirror of humanity, then comes the moment of the meeting. It usually happens when you are at your lowest, perhaps, while you are retching by the river or struggling to drag a log that is too heavy for your weakened frame. You look up, and there he is, an ambassador of the wilderness. He does not look like the demons your priests described in London. He is tall, his skin the color of deep cedar, his hair greased with bear fat and adorned with the feather of a hawk. He stands with a posture that makes your king look like a beggar. He is not wearing iron, yet he looks unbreakable. He is not carrying a book, yet he looks wise. He looks at you, and in that gaze, you see yourself as you truly are, a wet, shivering creature covered in mud and failure. This is the mirror of the new world. For the first time in your life, you are the other. You are the Barbaros. He says nothing. He might leave a gift, a basket of parched corn, or a string of fish knot out of submission, but out of a terrifying pity. Or he might simply turn and melt back into the timber, leaving you with the ringing silence of your own inadequacy. The law of the long shadow. As you return to the camp on the evening of the 6th day, the social order shifts once more. The leaders of the settlement, the captains and the governors, try to maintain the illusion of dominion. They speak of treaties and fortifications. They talk of building palisades, tall walls of sharpened logs to keep the shadow out. But you know the truth. You have felt the gaze from the thicket. You realize that a wall of wood cannot stop a spirit of the air. You look at the logs you have spent all day uprighting, and they look like toothpicks against the vastness of the forest. The fear begins to take two shapes in the camp, the hater and the seeker. The hater wants to burn the woods, to turn the green abyss into a black ash, so that there is nowhere left for the shadow to hide. The seeker wants to leave the camp, to walk into the trees, and never come back, to trade the heavy iron of Europe for the light deerskin of the wilderness. Both are driven by the same primal force, the realization that the old world died the moment you stepped off the ship. You are in the age of the Titans now, and the Titans are watching you bleed. The night of the 1,000 eyes as the sun sets on the eve of your 7th day. The invisible neighbors become a chorus of the dark. You hear the drumming, or is it just the rhythmic thud of your own heart? You see the signal fires on the distant hills, tiny orange sparks that talk to each other across the valleys. They are a language of light that you cannot translate. You lie in your dugout, the earth pressing against your back. You realize that the Gaia of America is not lonely. She is being sung to by 1,000 voices every night. She is being tended by hands that do not use the plow. You are the deaf man at a concert. You are the blind man in a gallery. The week of the colonist is the realization that your civilization is a tiny, flickering candle in a hurricane of ancient life. You grip your charm, your Bible, your coin, or your piece of woodend. You pray for the dawn. But for the first time, you are not praying to the God of London. You are praying to the God of the shadows, the one who moves the leaves and holds the breath of the wolf. You are learning to fear the true king of the land. By the seventh day, the softness of mercy has vanished from the settlement. In the first few days, there was a sense of shared adventure, a communal grace born of shared hardship. But hunger, fever, and the shadow in the woods have stripped that away. The governors and captains have looked into the eyes of the men and women and seen the pursed stirrings of chaos. They have seen the titan of anarchy waking up in the hearts of the weary. To combat this, they bring forth the iron law. In the colonial week, law is not a set of abstract principles discussed in a courtroom. It is a physical force. It is a wall of rules designed to keep the human spirit from dissolving into the mud, the gavel, and the stump. In the center of the muddy clearing, the place you call a town square, though it is nothing but a patch of trampled earth, stands the seat of judgment. It is often nothing more than a freshly cut oak stump, the rings of its life still weeping sap. Here, the divine law of the old world is translated into the brutal law of the new. You stand among the assembly, your legs trembling from the seasoning fever. You are forced to watch the trial of the crumb. Amana Taylor, from Bristol, who dreamed of owning 1,000 acres, has been caught stealing a handful of oatmeal from the common store. In London, this might have earned him a night in a cell. Here, in the first week, it is treated as a cosmic betrayal. The governor speaks. His voice is not the voice of a man, but the voice of the settlement itself. In this wilderness, he says, there is no I, there is only the we. To steal from the store is to steal the breath from your brother's lungs. It is to invite the void into our circle. The sentence is not a fine or a term of service. It is the stocks, the anatomy of the shaming you watch as the tailor is led to the wooden engine, the stocks. It is a crude device of heavy timber with holes cut for the neck and wrists. It is a mechanical purgatory. When the beams are locked into place, the man is no longer a human being. He is a spectacle. For the next 12 hours, he will sit in the mud. He cannot swat the clouds of fire, the mosquitoes that settle on his face. He cannot wipe the rain from his eyes. He is exposed to the gaze of the forest and the scorn of the camp. But the true cruelty of the iron law is its rhythmic silence. As you pass him throughout the day, you are forbidden to speak to him. You are forbidden to offer him a drop of water. This is the social death. You are being taught that in the new world, the group is the only source of life. To be cast out of the social heart is to be handed over to the Gia of the woods, who does not care for your survival. The litany of the blue laws. As the evening of the seventh day approaches, the religious law begins to weave itself into the military law. In the colonies of the north, the Sabbath is approaching. In the Greek myths, the gods demanded sacrifices of wine and fat. The colonial god demands a sacrifice of time and joy. You are told that on the seventh day, the axe must rest, not because you are tired, though you are dying of exhaustion, but because to work on the day of the Lord is to invite the lightning. You must sit in the damp meeting house, a structure of raw logs that smells of sap and sweat. You must listen to a sermon that lasts for 5 hours. The preacher speaks of the depravity of the heart. He tells you that the wilderness around you is a physical reflection of the wilderness inside you. He says that the snakes of the woods are the thoughts of your mind. You sit on a hard wooden bench, your back aching, your stomach screaming for food, and you are told that your suffering is a gift. This is the mental fortification. The leaders know that if you have time to think, you will have time to despair. If you have time to wonder why you left your mother's house, you will flee. And so, they fill the silence with the iron clang of the gospel. They turn the quiet of the woods into a trial of the soul. The discipline of the guard, the law, extends to the midnight watch. Every man, regardless of his status, whether he be a gentleman of the court or a laborer of the field, must take his turn as a sentry of the abyss. You are handed a pike, a 10-foot pole of ash tipped with steel. You are stationed at the edge of the clearing, where the light of the camp meets the ink of the forest. Your orders are simple. If it moves and does not speak the password, strike. This is where the iron law becomes paranoia. You stand in the dark, the cold wind of the Atlantic biting through your thin wool coat. You are looking for the titan, the savage, or the wolf. But mostly, you are looking for the ghost. You are terrified that the law will find you sleeping at your post. The penalty for sleeping on watch is death, a swift, cold end by the matchlock or the noose. You realize that the settlement has become a clockwork machine. Every gear must turn, or the whole mechanism collapses. You are a tiny cog in a great engine of survival. The iron law has stripped away your name, your dreams, and your desires. It has replaced them with duty. The breaking of the gentleman in this chapter of the week, you witness the great leveling. There is a gentleman in your camp, a man who arrived with silken stockings and a silver-hilted sword. For the first 6 days, he tried to maintain the dignity of London. He refused to dig the waste pits. He complained of the coarseness of the bread. On the 7th day, the iron law catches him. He is ordered to carry water for the sick. He refuses. The captain of the guard, a man who was a common soldier in the Low Countries, does not argue. He does not appeal to the man's honor. He simply points to the wooden engine of the stocks. In this land, the captain says, your blood is not blue. It is red, and it is thin. If you do not carry the water, you do not drink the water. You watch as the gentleman takes the bucket. His hands, once white and soft, are now stained with the gray clay of America. He weeps as he walks toward the river. This is the casting down of the titans. The old hierarchy of Europe is being crushed by the weight of the necessity. You realize that the new world does not care who your father was. It only cares if you can carry the weight, the peace of the bound. As you return to your dugout at the end of the 7th day, a strange serenity settles over you. It is the peace of the prisoner. When there are no choices left to make, the anxiety of the soul begins to fade. The iron law has told you when to wake, when to eat, when to work, and when to pray. It has taken the chaos of the first week and hammered it into a linear path. You are no longer lost in the woods. You are moving toward a goal, even if that goal is simply to last until Tuesday. You look at the stocks in the moonlight. They look like an altar. You realize that the settlement is a sacrifice. You are sacrificing your freedom to buy a chance at life. You are trading your will for the safety of the wall. In the Greek myths, the age of law followed the age of war. As you close your eyes on the final night of your first week, you feel the heavy hand of the law pressing you down into the earth. It is cruel, it is cold, and it is unyielding, but it is the only thing that is solid in a world of shifting shadows. The first week is ending. The iron has entered your soul. You have moved from man to settler. You have moved from citizen to survivor. It is thick, heavy, and seemingly alive. As you stand there, your hands gripping the cold wood of your pike, you realize that the Uranus of the sky has completely abandoned you. There is no moon tonight, only a canopy of clouds that smothers the stars. The sensory dissolution, when the eyes are denied light, the other senses begin to stretch and mutate. This is the first trial of the midnight watch, the dissolution of the self. In the silence, you begin to hear the internal rhythms of your own body. You hear the whoosh of the blood in your ears, a sound like a distant sea. You hear the click of your jaw. You hear the drumbeat of your heart, which feels far too loud for a man trying to be invisible. Then the forest begins to speak back. To the 17th century mind, the wilderness is not unpopulated. It is teeming with intelligences. You hear a thump in the undergrowth. This is the mockery of the woods. The forest plays upon your paranoia, using your own exhaustion to manufacture demons. In the Greek myths, Phobator was the god of nightmares who took the form of animals and monsters. On the colonial perimeter, Phobator is your constant companion. You begin to contemplate the spiritual abyss. The language of the willow, the wisp across the marsh. You see a light. It is a pale, flickering green glow that dances just above the water. In the old world, they called these ignis fatuus, the fool's fire. You were told stories as a child that these were the lanterns of the dead, leading travelers to their doom in the bogs. As you watch the light, you feel a siren's call. There is a part of youth apart that is broken by the iron law and the bloody flux that wants to walk toward it. You want to leave the mud and the pike behind and dissolve into the mystery. This is the suicide of the pioneer, the moment where the will to exist is overborne by the vastness of the unknown, but the iron law holds you. You remember the stocks, you remember the gallows. You realize that the discipline of man is the only thing keeping you from the madness of the woods. You turn your gaze away from the green flame and back to the cold gray ash of the camp's dying fire, the fellowship of the ghost. Suddenly, you are not alone. The relief has arrived. Another settler, man you know only as the smith, approaches to take the next watch. He does not speak. In the midnight watch, words are heavy things that you do not waste. You look into his eyes as you pass the pike to him. In the faint, dying glow of the embers, you see the same ghost in his expression. You see the 7 days of decay. You see the fear of the void. Without a word, you have shared a communion of the damned. You are both exiles of time, standing on the lip of a new world that does not want you. You walk back toward your dugout. The ground feels spongy and unstable. The settlement looks different at 3 a.m. It looks like a wreckage, a collection of holes and heaps that the forest will eventually reclaim. You realize that history is not made of grand cities, but of individual nights like this one, where a single man refused to run away from the dark. The descent into the underworld sleep, you crawl back into your hole in the earth. The dampness of the soil meets the dampness of your clothes. You are covered in the continent. As you close your eyes, the rhythms of the watch continue to play in your mind. You still hear the crack of the twig. You still see the flicker of the green light. But there is a new sensation, acceptance. You have lasted the 7th night. You have looked into the eye of the abyss, and though you are terrified, you have not blinked. You are no longer waiting to live. You are living the wait. The midnight watch has taught you the final lesson of the first week. The wilderness is not out there. The wilderness is in here. You have brought the chaos with you across the sea. And now, in the silence of the American night, you must learn to rule it or be consumed by it, as the first, bruised purple light of the 8th day begins to bleed into the eastern sky. You fall into a deep, dreamless sleep, the sleep of the exhausted Titan. The first week is officially over. You are a colonial American. If you survived the first 7 days, the hunger, the iron law, and the psychological weight of the midnight watch, you are met with a new, more intimate adversary. The colonist journals call it the seasoning. To the modern ear, it sounds like a culinary term, a way of preparing something for use. But to the 17th century pioneer, it was a gauntlet of fire. It was the process by which the old world blood was drained away to be replaced by the new world humors. In the beginning of your 2nd week, the exhaustion you feel is no longer just muscular. It is cellular. You wake up in your dugout on the 8th morning, and the world has turned a sickly, jaundiced yellow. The sunlight filtering through the thatch roof feels like needles against your eyes. You try to stand, but your knees have turned to water. This is the beginning of the great leveling, where the microscopic titans of the American soil begin their work. The war of the water. The primary weapon of the new world is the water. In your first week, you drank from the river because the fire in your throat demanded it. You did not see the invisible armies swimming in the brackish flow. In the 17th century, there was no concept of germ theory. There was only miasma, the belief that disease was carried on the evil breath of the swamps. You feel the flux dysentery return with a vengeance. It is a rhythmic agony. Your body is trying to expel the new world, while the new world is trying to colonize you. You lose the sense of time. The days blend into a single blurred cycle of pain. You lie on your bed of pine boughs, and you listen to the sounds of the camp. They have changed. The thud of the axe is less frequent now. It has been replaced by the groan of the sick and the soft thud of the shovel-digging graves in the sandy soil. The anatomy of the ague, then comes the ague, the malaria of the marshlands. In the Greek myths, the Furies would haunt a man until his mind broke. The ague is a physical fury. It operates on a sinister clockwork. For 6 hours, you are consumed by a heat so intense you feel your hair might catch fire. You strip off your wool clothes, your skin glowing a dark, angry red. You crave ice, you crave the Arctic breath of the north, but you are trapped in the humid vice of the American summer. Then, without warning, the ice arrives. The fever breaks and is replaced by a rigidity of the bone. You shiver so violently that the very timber of your dugout seems to vibrate. You wrap yourself in every scrap of cloth you own, but the cold is coming from inside. It is the cold of Tartarus. This is the biological seasoning. Your immune system, which for 20 or 30 years was tuned to the mild ales of an English village, is now being rewired by the pathogens of a continent it does not recognize. You are being remade. Those who survive this process will emerge with a hardened constitution, a body that has signed a treaty with the American soil. Those who do not are returned to the Gaia of the woods, their journey ending in a shallow trench marked only by a wooden cross that will rot within the year. The failure of the old world medicine in your delirium. You see the settlement surgeon enter your dugout. He is a man of good intentions and terrible tools. He carries a lancet, a small, sharp blade of steel. In the 17th century, the cure for a body in chaos was to drain the chaos out. He takes your arm. His hands are stained with the clay of the graves he has been helping to dig. He finds a vein. You feel the sharp bite of the steel, and you watch as your life force, that dark, crimson river, flows into a pewter bowl. He is looking for clots or discolorations, signs of corrupted humors, but the bloodletting only hastens the end. You are already empty. You are already starved. To lose the blood is to lose the last heat of your spirit. You realize that the science of the East is a broken staff in this wilderness. The knowledge of the universities cannot compete with the virulence of the swamp, the survival of the lowly. A strange irony emerges in the second week of the Great Sickness. The gentlemen, the men of high birth and clean hands, are the first to fall. Their bodies, shielded by luxury and soft living, have no armor against the seasoning. They die in their silk shirts, their mouths full of gilded complaints. But the laborers, the men who spent their lives in the soot of London or the muck of the farm, seem to hold on. Their bodies are scarred landscapes already. They have survived the smallpox, the measles, and the rot of the city. They have a grim vitality that the gods of high status do not possess. You watch as a common maid, a woman who was brought along to scrub floors and cook porridge, becomes the guardian of the camp. While the captain is weeping in his fever dream, she is moving from dugout to dugout. She carries a bitter tea made from the bark of the cinchona or the sassafras. Knowledge she has gathered by watching the invisible neighbors. She is the New World Hecate, the weaver of life and death, the spiritual thinning. As the sickness reaches its zenith, the veil between the worlds becomes thin. You lie in the dark, and you can no longer tell if you are awake or dreaming. You hear the voice of the forest more clearly now. It is not a threat, it is an invitation. Come back, the trees seem to say. Return the borrowings of your body. Give the iron back to the stones. Give the salt back to the sea. This is the biological temptation. To die is to belong. To die is to stop being an intruder and to become a part of the map. You feel a weightless peace beginning to settle over you. The iron law no longer matters. The hunger no longer bites. There is only the rhythmic pulse of the earth calling you home. But then you hear a sound. It is the clink of a bucket. It is the cuss of a man struggling with a stubborn log. It is the human noise, and that noise hooks you. It pulls you back from the edge of the abyss. You realize that the settlement is not just a collection of holes in the earth. You stay alive out of a stubborn, irrational defiance. The emergence of the seasoned by the 14th day, the end of your second week, the great sickness begins to recede. The heat leaves your blood, the ice leaves your bones. You wake up, and for the first time in a week, the air smells sweet. You are thin. Your clothes hang off your frame like the sails of a ghost ship. Your eyes are deep in your skull. But when you stand, your legs hold. They are no longer water. They have become fiber and string. You walk out into the sunlight. The settlement looks smaller. There are new mounds in the garden of the dead, but the survivors move with a new rhythm. They move with a heavy grace. They endure it. You have been seasoned. You have survived the baptism of the swamp. You have traded your European innocence for a colonial soul. You look at the wall of green, and it no longer looks indifferent. It looks like a mirror. You see your own hardness reflected in the bark of the oak. You pick up your axe. Your hands are cracked, but the grip is sure. You strike the tree. Thud. The sound is solid. It is the sound of a survivor claiming his space. The great sickness has passed, and in its wake, a new species of human has been born. By the third week, the realization settles over the camp like a heavy frost. The seeds you brought from the old world, the wheat, the rye, the barley are failing. You stand in the center of your small, ragged clearing, looking down at the English garden you dreamed of planting. The sprouts are thin, jaundiced, and pale. They look like exiles, as out of place in this towering wilderness as you are. This is the agrarian abyss. You have discovered that the Gaia of America does not speak the language of the European farmer. The soil here is a mystery of the ages. In the forests of the New World, the earth is composed of 10,000 years of decaying pine needles, fallen giants, and the bitter tannins of the oak. It is acidic, stubborn, and jealous. It does not want your delicate, pampered grains. The death of the wheat. In the old world, wheat was the staff of life, a golden symbol of civilization. But here, the great wheat is a sacrifice. The humidity of the American coast, that thick, heavy breath of the ocean, invites the blast and the mildew. You watch as your stalks turn black with rot before they can even head. The Uranus of the sky brings sudden, violent thunderstorms that flatten your fragile rows into the mud. You realize that you are trying to force a European order onto an American chaos. The social hierarchy of the camp begins to buckle under this failure. The governor promised that by the first month the fields would be green. Instead, they are a graveyard of seeds. The hunger, which was a sharp bite in your first week, has now become a dull ache in your very bones. You look at your bag of seed grain, the grain you were supposed to plant for the future, and you find yourself contemplating the great sin, eating the hope of tomorrow to survive the despair of today. The curse of the Indian corn. It is then that you look to your invisible neighbors and see the golden titan, maize. To the 17th century Englishman, Indian corn was a barbarous grain. It was not the refined, powdered flour of the nobility. It was a hard, multicolored stone that required the strength of a giant to grind. In your desperation, you begin to plant the corn, but you do not plant it in the orderly rows of an English field. You are forced to adopt the Three Sisters method of the indigenous people, a holy trinity of corn, beans, and squash. As you dig the mounds for the corn, Your hands find the rhythm of the land. You place a small fish, an alewife, or a menhaden into the earth with the seed. This is a sacrifice to the soil. You are feeding the earth so that the earth might feed you. This is the first treaty you sign with the American continent, not a treaty of ink and paper, but a treaty of fish and flint, the alchemy of the mortar and pestle. Once the corn grows, the labor does not end. In the Greek myths, the grain of Hades was the pomegranate, a fruit that bound Persephone to the underworld. Corn is the grain of the colony, and it binds you to the cycle of toil. Because there are no water mills in the first weeks, you must grind the corn by hand. You sit for hours with a mortar and pestle fashioned from a hollowed log and a heavy stone. Thud, scrape, thud, scrape. The sound becomes the lullaby of the settlement. It is a rhythmic, hypnotic task that wears down your spirit as much as the grain. The resulting meal is coarse and gritty. When you boil it into hasty pudding or samp, it tastes of smoke and ash. It does not satisfy the soul. Like a loaf of wheaten bread, but it hardens the gut. It gives you the lead in your veins necessary to swing the axe for another 10 hours. You are becoming made of corn, a human being reconstructed from the very stones of the land, the war of the pests. But the Gaia of America has many children, and they all want a share of your harvest. As soon as the green shoots of the corn emerge, the armies of the air descend. In the old world, you dealt with sparrows and crows. Here, you deal with clouds of blackbirds that darken the sun. You deal with the raccoon, a shadow-masked thief that you have never seen before. A creature with the hands of a child and the heart of a fox. It raids your mounds at night, leaving only the scraps of your hope behind. You are forced to become a guardian of the grain. You spend your nights in the midnight watch, not looking for savages, but looking for verge creatures. You realize that the wilderness is not just out there, it is in the soil. Every inch of ground you have cleared is a battlefield that the forest is trying to reclaim. The weeds grow with a ferocity that feels personal. They wrap around your ankles like green snakes, trying to pull you back into the mire. The silence of the God of plenty. By the end of the 3rd week, the spiritual weight of the harvest failure begins to thin the ranks. In the Greek myths, the Titans were undone by their own hubris. You realize that the hubris of the colonist was the belief that the earth was a servant. You sit by your small fire, looking at your bitter harvest. You see the gentleman staring at the empty horizon, waiting for a supply ship that may never come. You see the women weeping over pots of thin gruel, but then you see the seasoned man. He is the one who has stopped asking the earth and has started listening to it. He has stopped trying to grow English wheat and has started gathering wild acorns. He has stopped looking for the God of plenty and has found the God of the scraps, the communion of the gritty bread. As the sun sets on the 21st day, you take a piece of cornbread from the common hearth. It is hard, dry, and bitter, but as you chew it, you feel a new kind of strength. It is not the soft strength of the old world. It is the hard strength of the stump. You have moved from being a participator of the land to a participator in its mystery. You have tasted the salt of the sea, the blood of the fever, and now the grit of the corn. You realize that the golden age was a lie. This is the age of the root. You are a root yourself now, burrowing deep into the acidic soil of the new world. Holding on with a stubborn, silent will. The harvest may be bitter, but it is yours. You have bought this grain with the currency of your youth. As you close your eyes and the rhythmic thud of the mortar fades into the sigh of the wind, you realize that you are no longer waiting for a harvest. You are the harvest. You are the seed that the old world cast into the void, and against all the laws of God and man, you have begun to sprout. By the 28th day, a strange linguistic decay has set in. Back in the old world, words were solid things. A road was a path of stone. A house was a structure of brick. A season was a predictable cycle of planting and harvest. But here, the mother tongue feels thin and anemic. It was a language designed for a tamed landscape, and it is failing to describe the Gia of the American wild. You find yourself standing before a tree that has no name in your vocabulary. It is not the English oak. It is something deeper, darker, and more resilient. You find yourself looking at a bird with feathers like burning coals and a cry like a rusty hinge. Your mind searches for a word robin, sparrow, nightingale, but the labels slide off the reality like rain off a leaf. This is the aphasia of the frontier. To live here, you must first forget how to speak. The death of the polite word in the first week. The gentlemen of the colony spoke in ornate sentences. They used the language of courtship and commerce. They spoke of investment, dominion, and providence. But as the hunger and the seasoning fever stripped the meat from their bones, the adjectives were the first to go. The language of the fourth week is monosyllabic. It is a language of nouns and verbs. Dig, cold, blood, fire. Words have become tools, and like your axes, they are blunted by constant use. You no longer have the breath for metaphor. When you speak to your neighbor in the neighboring dugout, you do not ask after his constitutional health. You ask, live, and he nods, yes. And that is the fullness of the conversation. This is the echo of chaos. You are returning to a state before language was used to decorate the world. You are using it to survive it. The social mask of English society is melting away, revealing the primal throat beneath, the intrusion of the wild word. As your own language thins, the language of the invisible neighbors begins to seep into the camp. It arrives not through books, but through necessity. You hear words that have a rhythm of the earth: squash, succotash, hickory, moccasin. At first, these words feel sharp and foreign in your mouth. They feel like small stones you are trying to swallow, but you realize that these words carry the spirit of the object. The English word shoe does not describe the soft, deerskin wrap that allows you to walk through the woods without the snap of a twig. You need the word moccasin because the word carries the silence of the hunter. You are witnessing the birth of a dialect. It is a cousin to English, but it is being crossbred with the acidic soil of the New World. You find yourself using sea terms for land objects, because the sailor's tongue was the only one that knew how to describe danger and void. You speak of anchoring a fence post or rigging a shelter. You are a linguistic castaway, building a raft of words to keep your mind above the water. The silence of the Great Mother. The most profound change, however, is not the words you use, but the new silence you have adopted. In London, silence was empty. Here, silence is full. You have learned that to survive the midnight watch, you must be quiet as the stone. You have learned that gossip and laughter are loud signals to the predators in the brush. The settlement has become a hushed place. You move through the street like shadows in an underworld. This silence is a sacrifice to the gods of the woods. You are trying to match the frequency of the forest. You realize that the old world was a world of noise, of bells, of carts, of shouting markets. The new world is a world of listening. You have traded your voice for your ears. The failure of the Holy Book. Even the Word of God feels different in the fourth week. When the preacher reads from the Psalms in the meeting house, the words about green pastures and still waters feel like fables from a distant planet. The still waters, you know, are brackish and bitter. The green pastures are thickets of briars. You find yourself drawn to the older parts of the book, the stories of exile in the desert, the trials of Job, the void of Genesis. You realize that the religion of the city cannot survive the theology of the forest. You are looking for a God of the oak, a God of the storm, a God who does not speak in sentences, but in thunder and sickness. Your prayer has changed. It is no longer a list of requests. It is a rhythmic breathing. It is a plea for the sun to rise. You have moved past the litany of the church and into the meditation of the beast, the ghost voice of memory. Late at night, in the deep dark of your dugout, you hear the ghost voice. It is the voice of your mother, or your old master, or the girl you left in the lane. They speak with the perfect clarity of the old world. They use whole sentences. They use adjectives. But when you try to answer them, your throat feels tight. You realize you have forgotten the tune of your own life. You are a man of the present. The past is a script you no longer have the heart to perform. This is the final divorce, when the language of the home no longer fits the reality of the hand. The home is truly lost. You are no longer an Englishman in America. You are a new thing. You are a mute titan, standing on the edge of a continent, waiting for your new tongue to grow. The names written in the mud. By the end of the month, the only names that matter are the ones you have written in the mud. The names on the new graves. The names of the 7 survivors who still have the strength to lift the axe. You look at the wall of green. You no longer try to name it. You simply acknowledge it. You have reached a treaty of silence with the wilderness. You will not command it with your words, and it will not consume you with its shadows. Not today. As you close your eyes and the rhythmic sigh of the wind in the pines fills your head, you realize that you are dreaming in a new language. It is a language of vibrations, of sense, and of atmospheric pressure. It is the language of the woods. The mother tongue is dead. Long live the voice of the frontier. By the end of your second month, the mercy of the sun has begun to retreat. In the old world, winter was a social season, a time for the gathering of the village, the burning of the Yule log, and the security of the stone barn. But in the colonial wilderness, winter is a physical predator. It is not a season. It is a slow siege. The treachery of the Little Ice Age in the 17th century. The world was gripped by what historians call the Little Ice Age. The winters were not merely cold, they were elemental. The rivers did not just skim with ice, they became highways of glass. To the colonist who expected the temperate vines and olives described by the early explorers, this is a cosmic betrayal. You find that your old world clothing is a joke to the American frost. The wool, which felt heavy in London, feels like spiderwebs against the biting north wind, the Boreas of the New World. The wind does not blow around your shelter. It blows through it. It finds every crack in the wattle and daub, every gap in the thatch. The physics of the frontier are cruel. You are a heat engine running out of fuel, the white hunger. Hunger in the winter is different from the green hunger of the summer. In the summer, there was always the hope of the berry or the gift of the river. In the winter, the Great Mother has locked the cupboard. You watch as your companions shrink within their clothes. Their faces become topographical maps of bone and shadow. You see the strong becoming weak and the weak becoming invisible, the spiritual frost. As the midnight watch continues in the snow, the psychology of the dark turns brittle. In the summer, the woods were teeming with intelligences. In the winter, the woods are vacant. This emptiness is more terrifying than the shadows. You feel as though you are the last human being in a dead universe. The god of London feels like a summer god, a god of green leaves and soft rain. He does not seem to belong in this kingdom of the ice. You find yourself looking at the indigenous neighbors. If they have retreated to their winter campsand, you see that they have adapted. They move on snowshoes made of ash and gut. They wear furs that carry the heat of the beast. You realize that your civilization is artificially warm. You are a greenhouse creature trying to survive in the void. You begin to envy the wolf. You envy the bear in its deep sleep. You realize that history is a warm weather luxury out here. In the first frost, there is only existence. By the heart of the first winter, the settlement has ceased to be a place of hope. It has become a Lazarus house. The supplies of the crown are not just low, they are gone. The corn you fought the soil to produce has been consumed, kernel by blackened kernel. The golden age is a memory so distant it feels like a lie told by a stranger. This is the starving time, a period where time itself seems to stop. And existence is measured in the rhythmic throb of a hollow stomach. In the 17th century journals, This period is described with a harrowing brevity. Men did not have the ink, the paper, or the energy of the soul to write long descriptions. They wrote only of the void. You wake up in your dugout, and the hunger is no longer a pain. It has become a vibration. It is a low hum that resonates in your teeth. Your body has consumed its fat, then its muscle, and now it has begun to taste the spirit, the consumption of the domestics. The first stage of the descent is the sacrifice of the companions. In the beginning, you had dogs for protection, cats for the vermin, and horses for the labor. These were the emblems of the old world. They represented the dominion of man over the beast. One by one, they are consumed. You watch as the gentleman's charger, the noble beast that survived the Atlanticist, led to the butcher's stump. There is no ritual, there is no feast. There is only the silent, desperate division of the meat. You eat the hide, you boil the hooves until they turn into a gray, gelatinous glue that coats your throat. You eat the dogs that once slept at your feet. This is the ate of the Greeks, the madness of the gut that blinds the heart. As you swallow the last of the domestic life, you realize that the barrier between you and the beast has vanished. You are no longer a master, you are a scavenger, you are a titan of the ash, the anatomy of the vile things. When the companions are gone, the starving time moves into the microscopic. You begin to look at the world of the creeping things with a predatory clarity. You hunt the rat in the storehouse, not to protect the grain, but to become the rat. You catch the mice that huddle in your thatch. You cook them whole over a smoldering ember, eating the bones and the fur for the ghost of the calcium they provide. You go to the woods and you strip the inner bark of the birch tree. You grind it into a sawdust flour to bulk out your thin gruel. You eat leather, your own boots, your leather jerkin, the scabbard of your sword. You boil them for days until they are softened enough to be masticated. This is the alchemy of the damned. You are eating your history. You are consuming the tools you brought to build a world, just to stay alive for another rotation of the sun. The breakdown of the social soul in the Greek myths. When the Titans were hungry, they did not care for justice. In the starving time, the iron law of chapter 6 begins to dissolve. The magistrate can no longer shame you, for you have no pride left. He can no longer punish you, for life is already the ultimate penalty. You see the human taboos begin to fray like an old rope. You hear whispers in the dark of the camp, the stories of the forbidden. You hear of the man in the next dugout who did not bury his wife, but kept her cold form as a source of sustenance. This is the cannibalism of the soul. Whether it happens literally or metaphorically, the taboo is broken. You realize that civilization is a thin crust over a melted center of pure necessity. You look at your neighbor. You no longer see a brother. You see a resource. You see a competitor for the last acorn. This is the solitude of Hades. You are surrounded by people, but you are absolutely alone in your hunger. The rhythmic breathing of the camp has turned into a death rattle. The ghost walking of the colony. The physical world begins to thin. You are walking between the worlds because your brain is starved of glucose. The hallucinations return with a terrifying, permanent presence. You see ships on the frozen horizon, golden galleons filled with bread and wine. You hear bells ringing in the forest. You realize that the settlement is no longer real. It is a ghost town, inhabited by walking skeletons. Out of the 500 who started the winter, only 60 remain. You are the remnant of a remnant. You are the living evidence of the indifference of the universe. The Gia of America is watching you fade. She is not angry, she is not cruel, she is simply patient. She knows that in a few more weeks, the iron and the bone you brought from Europe will be hers. She is waiting for the return of the nitrogen, the last spark of the hearth. On the darkest night of the starving time, you sit by a fire that is nothing but a single glowing coal. You are too weak to chop wood. You are too weak to pray. You are simply holding the spark. In the Greek myths, Prometheus gave fire to man to elevate him. In the starving time, fire is the only thing that defines you as human. As long as the coal is red, you are not yet a shadow. You find a new kind of will. In this underworld, it is not the will of the hero, it is the will of the stone. It is a refusal to vanish. You look at your hands, they are claws. You look at your feet, they are blackened by frostbite, but you will your heart to beat one more time, and then one more. This is the rhythm of the abyss. It is a slow, painful, ugly persistence. You have stripped away the gods, the king, the law, and the language. You are nothing but hunger and heat, and in that nothingness you find the seed of the new American. You are the one who stayed. You are the one who ate the leather and lived. The transition begins with a sound, the cracking of the river. For months, the water has been a solid grave, a sheet of gray glass that locked the settlement away from the world. But on a morning in late March, you hear a boom like a distant cannon. It is the ice giving way. The Pontes of the New World is waking up. You crawl out of your dugout, your movements slow and rhythmic, like a creature emerging from a long hibernation. The light is different today. It is no longer the steel blue of the winter. It is a pale golden honey. It hits your face, and for the first time in 100 days, you feel the touch of Hyperion, the Lord of Light. You close your eyes, and you feel the vitamin of the sun seeping into your translucent skin. This is the first breath of your new life, the return of the green titan as the snow retreats. The Gia of America reveals her scars. You see the stumps of the trees you cut. You see the mounds of the graves. You see the wreckage of your first week. But beneath the mud and the ash, something is moving. The skunk cabbage pushes through the thawing earth a vibrant, impossible green. The willows begin to glow with a yellow mist of new buds. In your first week, this greenery was a wall to be conquered. Now it is a brother. You look at the persistence of the root, and you recognize your own stubbornness. You realize that the wilderness is not something to be defeated. It is a rhythm to be joined. You no longer want to command the woods. You want to flow with them. The hunger begins to recede as the herring and the shad return to the rivers. You stand on the bank with a dip net fashioned from the rags of your old world clothes. You feel the vibration of the fish in the water, thousands of them, a silver torrent of life returning from the abyss. You catch them by the bucketful. You eat until your stomach revolts at the abundance. This is the feast of the resurrection. You are being rebuilt by the flesh of the river, the arrival of the ghost ship. Then, on the horizon of the 8th month, the prophecy is fulfilled. A sail appears. In the Greek myths, the argosy brought the golden fleece to the 60 survivors of the starving time. The supply ship brings something more valuable, continuity. As the ship drops anchor, you watch the new arrivals step onto the beach. You see them with a sorrowful clarity. You see their white skin, their soft hands, their clean doublets. You see the arrogance. In their eyes, the same hubris you carried a year ago. They look at you, and they see a specter. They see a man covered in grease and ash, with eyes that look through them rather than at them. You realize that you can no longer speak their language. When they talk of the king's business or London fashion, it sounds like the buzzing of insects. Your business is the axe and the corn. Your fashion is the scar and the callus. You have become alien to your own kind. You are the first generation of the displaced, the synthesis of the new man. In this final chapter of the colonial week, the European and the American merge into a new alchemy in the Greek myths. The demigods were born of the union between the divine and the mortal. You are a demigod of the mud. You carry the memory of the old world in your mind, but your body belongs to the new. You find that you no longer fear the invisible neighbors. You have learned to read the woods. You know the scent of the rain before it falls. You know the path of the deer. You have traded your military drill for the cunning of the fox. You have reached a state of grace with the shadows. The iron law of the settlement has softened. It has become a common sense of the soil. You work not because the governor commands it, but because the season demands it. You have found a new liberty within the strict necessity of survival. It is the liberty of the root, the freedom to grow deep and strong in an unforgiving earth. The altar of the frontier, you build a new house. It is not a dugout, and it is not a manor. It is a log cabin, the marriage of the tree and the tool. It smells of fresh pine and old smoke. It is the first temple of the American spirit. As you sit on the threshold of this new home, you look back at the week that lasted a lifetime. You realize that why you would outlast a week was a question for the old you. The you who stepped off the ship would have perished. He did perish. He was eaten by the sickness, frozen by the winter, and dissolved by the silence. The person sitting here now is a new creation. You are the survivor. You are the titan who did not fall. You look at your hands. They are mapped with the history of the land. You look at the wall of green, and you see it not as a wall, but as a gateway. The deep lullaby of the continent, the cosmos, has found a new balance. The Uranus of the sky and the Gaia of the earth are no longer at war. They have joined to create the colonial twilight. You hear the rhythmic sound of the night once more. The crickets, the frogs, the wind. But it no longer sounds like a threat. It sounds like a lullaby. It is the voice of the continent, welcoming you to your rest. You have earned the soil. You have paid the tribute of the blood. You lie down in your new bed, made of sturdy oak and soft furs. You feel the vibration of the earth beneath you. It is solid. It is permanent. You are no longer a visitor. You are a part of the map. As you drift into the deepest sleep of your life, the history of the first week fades into the myth of the new world. The ancient nothingness has been filled. The chaos has been ordered. You are home. The story is over. The wilderness is still. The fires are low. Sleep now, for you have lasted. You have endured. You have become the history that others will dream of. Good night.